Baby Leopard begs humans to save his pregnant mother, trapped inside a tree, and the unthinkable happens. The sun hung low over the Gir Forest Reserve in Gujarat, India, casting long amber shadows through the dense canopy. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wild jasmine, and the afternoon heat pressed down on everything like a heavy blanket. In the distance, the calls of peacocks echoed through the trees, but closer, much closer, there was another sound, a sound that didn't belong to the rhythm of the forest. It was a cry, high-pitched, desperate, and relentless. Arjun Mehta had been a forest ranger for nearly 15 years, and he knew the language of the wild better than most. He could tell the difference between a monkey's alarm call and a deer's distress signal, between the rustle of a snake and the soft padding of a predator. But this sound, this frantic, pleading wail, was something he had never heard before. It came from somewhere deep within the western edge of the reserve, near the old banyan grove, where the trees grew so thick that even sunlight struggled to penetrate. "Did you hear that?" Arjun asked, pausing mid-step on the narrow dirt path. His younger colleague, Ravi, a recent recruit still learning the ways of the forest, stopped beside him and tilted his head. "If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and stay with us." "Sounds like a cat," Ravi said, frowning. "Maybe a stray." Arjun shook his head slowly. "No, that's not a domestic animal. That's wild." The cry came again, louder this time, more insistent. It was followed by a low, guttural moan, deeper, older, pained. Arjun felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat. He had spent enough years in these woods to know when something was very wrong. "Come on," he said, adjusting the strap of his binoculars and quickening his pace. Ravi followed close behind, his boots crunching softly against the dry leaves. They moved through the underbrush carefully, pushing aside vines and ducking beneath low branches. The cries grew louder, more frequent, and Arjun's heartbeat quickened. He had seen injured animals before, leopards caught in snares, elephants wounded by poachers, tigers struck by vehicles on the highway. But something about this felt different. There was urgency in the sound, yes, but there was also something else, something almost deliberate. Then they saw it. At the base of an enormous, centuries-old banyan tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled with age, stood a young leopard cub. It couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 months old. Its golden coat was dappled with dark rosettes, and its ears were still too large for its head, giving it an almost innocent, vulnerable appearance. But there was nothing innocent about the way it was behaving. The cub was pacing back and forth in front of the tree, its green eyes wide and frantic. Every few seconds it would stop, look up toward the hollow in the trunk high above, and let out that same piercing cry. Then it would turn, take a few steps toward the path where Arjun and Ravi stood frozen, and cry again, this time looking directly at them. "My God," Ravi whispered. Is it asking for help?" Arjun didn't answer. He was already scanning the tree, following the cub's gaze upward, and then he saw her. Wedged inside a deep hollow about 20 feet above the ground was a fully grown leopard. Her body was twisted at an unnatural angle, her hind legs trapped inside the narrow opening of the tree cavity, her front paws clawing weakly at the bark. Her breathing was labored, visible even from the ground, and her eyes, amber and glassy with pain, locked onto Arjun's for a brief, searing moment. She was pregnant. Her belly was swollen, unmistakable even from this distance. "She's stuck," Arjun said, his voice tight. "She went in through the hollow, probably chasing prey or looking for a den, and got trapped." The cub cried out again, louder, more desperate. It took a few steps toward them, then stopped, turned back to the tree, and cried again. It was as if it understood, as if it knew that these strange, two-legged creatures were the only ones who could help. "What do we do?" Ravi asked, his voice shaking. "If we get too close, she's too weak to attack," Arjun interrupted, though his hand instinctively moved to the radio clipped to his belt. "But we can't do this alone. We need the rescue team. Now." He raised the radio and spoke quickly, his words clipped and urgent. Base, this is Arjun. We have an emergency near the old Banyan Grove, western sector. Adult female leopard trapped inside a tree cavity. Pregnant. Cub present. Request immediate backup and veterinary support. The voice on the other end crackled to life. Copy that, Arjun. Dispatching team now. ETA 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Arjun glanced back at the tree. The mother leopard's breathing was growing more shallow. Her claws had stopped scraping at the bark. The cub stood at the base of the tree now, staring up at her, its cries softer but no less heartbreaking. We need to keep the cub calm, Arjun said quietly, and we need to make sure the mother doesn't panic when the team arrives. Ravi nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the cub. Do you think it knows we're here to help? Arjun didn't know. But as the cub turned once more, looked directly at him, and let out one last pleading cry, he felt something shift inside him, a sense of responsibility, of connection, of shared desperation. I think it does, he said softly. And in that moment, as the sun dipped lower and the shadows lengthened, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The minutes crawled by like hours. Arjun crouched low behind a cluster of wild ferns, about 15 feet from the banyan tree, his eyes never leaving the mother leopard. Ravi had positioned himself on the opposite side, creating a wide perimeter to ensure they could monitor both the cub and any other wildlife that might be drawn to the commotion. The forest had grown quieter, as if every creature within earshot understood that something significant was unfolding. The cub had finally stopped pacing. It sat now at the base of the tree, its tail curled around its small body, its gaze fixed upward. Every few minutes, it would release a soft, trembling mew, not the desperate cry from before, but something gentler, sadder, a sound of vigil. Arjun felt his chest tighten. He had seen countless animals in distress over the years, had witnessed births and deaths, had held dying fawns and released rehabilitated eagles back into the sky. But this connection between mother and child, this understanding in the cub's behavior, struck something deeper in him. He thought of his own mother, bedridden now in their small home on the edge of the reserve, her body weakened by illness, her eyes still bright with the same fierce love she had always shown him. He thought of the nights he sat beside her bed, holding her hand, wishing desperately that he could fix what was broken, that he could trap her pain inside a hollow and pull it out into the light. Arjun, Ravi's voice crackled softly through the radio. The mother, she's not moving much anymore. Arjun raised his binoculars. The leopard's eyes were half closed now, her breathing shallow and irregular. Her swollen belly rose and fell with effort. How long had she been trapped? Hours? A full day? Leopards were solitary, elusive creatures. She could have been stuck since the previous night, slowly exhausting herself in her attempts to escape. And the cub? Had it stayed here the entire time? Watching, waiting, growing more desperate until it heard human voices and made the unthinkable choice to approach? She's fading, Arjun said quietly into the radio. Where's the team? 15 minutes out, came the reply from base. Doctor? Priya is with them. They're bringing climbing gear and sedatives. Priya Sharma. Arjun felt a small wave of relief. She was the best wildlife veterinarian in the region, a woman who had saved more animals than most people had ever seen. If anyone could navigate the delicate balance of sedating a trapped pregnant leopard without harming her or the unborn cubs, it was Priya. The cub suddenly stood, its ears perking forward. It had heard something, the distant rumble of engines, still faint but growing closer. Instead of fleeing as any wild animal should, the cub turned toward the sound and then looked back at Arjun. The gesture was so deliberate, so unmistakably intentional, that Arjun felt goosebumps rise on his arms. It's okay, he whispered, though he knew the cub couldn't understand his words. They're coming. We're going to help her. The cub tilted its head, then sat back down, resuming its vigil. Arjun had not always been a forest ranger. 20 years ago, He had been a college student in Ahmedabad, studying engineering, dreaming of a corporate job in Mumbai or Delhi. But during a family trip to the Gir forest, everything had changed. He had been 22 years old, walking alone on a guided trail, when he stumbled upon a young Asiatic lion caught in a wire snare. The animal had been struggling for so long that the wire had cut deep into its leg, and blood stained the dry earth around it. The lion was weak, barely able to lift its head, but its eyes, those golden, defiant eyes, had locked onto Arjun's with such raw, unfiltered will to survive that it had shaken something loose inside him. He had run back to the ranger station, shouting, pulling the rangers from their lunch break, demanding they do something. They had. They had saved the lion. And when Arjun had returned to the city, he found that the engineering textbooks no longer made sense. The only thing that made sense was the memory of those eyes, that shared moment of understanding between two living beings. He had dropped out of college 6 months later and enrolled in the Forest Service training program. His father had been furious. His mother had cried. But she had also smiled later when he wasn't looking and told his father that their son had finally found his purpose. Now, crouched in the underbrush, with a leopard cub staring at him with that same desperate hope he had seen in the lion's eyes 2 decades ago, Arjun understood that some moments were simply meant to be, that some connections transcended language, species, logic, that sometimes the wild chose to trust you, and when it did, you had no choice but to be worthy of that trust. The sound of vehicles grew louder. 3 Forest Department jeeps came rumbling down the narrow path, their tires kicking up clouds of red dust. They stopped about 50 feet from the banyan tree, and the doors opened quickly. Dr. Priya Sharma stepped out first. She was in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back in a tight braid, her face set in the expression of focused intensity. She wore field khakis and carried a large veterinary kit in one hand. Behind her came 4 other rangers, 2 of them carrying ropes and climbing harnesses, another holding a long pole with a sedative-loaded dart gun, and the last one carrying a large animal transport cage. The cub leaped to its feet, startled by the sudden arrival of so many people. It backed up against the tree, its body tense, ready to flee. But then it looked up at its mother, then back at the humans, and something seemed to settle inside it. It stayed. Priya approached Arjun, her eyes scanning the scene. Status? Adult female, pregnant, trapped in the hollow about 20 feet up, Arjun said quickly. She's been there for at least several hours, maybe longer. She's exhausted. Breathing is shallow. The cub has been trying to get our attention. It's why we found her. Priya's eyes shifted to the cub, and for a brief moment her professional mask slipped, revealing something softer underneath. That's extraordinary. I know. She moved closer to the tree, binoculars raised, examining the mother leopard's position. She's wedged in tight. If we try to pull her out by force, we could injure her or trigger premature labor. We need to sedate her first, then carefully widen the opening. Will the sedative be safe for the cubs? Ravi asked, stepping forward. Priya nodded. I'll use a low dose, just enough to relax her muscles so we can maneuver her out. But we need to work fast. Once she's sedated, her breathing will slow even more. We'll have maybe 10-15 minutes. She turned to the rangers with the climbing gear. Rajesh, Vikram, get up there and assess the opening. See if we can remove any loose bark or branches to give us more room. The 2 men moved quickly, strapping on harnesses and securing ropes around the thick trunk. Within minutes, they were climbing, their movements careful and practiced. The cub watched them, its body rigid with tension, but it didn't flee. It seemed to understand, on some instinctive level, that these humans were here to help. Priya loaded the dart gun, her hands steady despite the pressure. Arjun, I need you to keep that cub calm. If it panics and tries to climb up to its mother, it could interfere with the rescue. Arjun nodded and moved slowly toward the cub, his body language open and non-threatening. He crouched down about 10 feet away and spoke softly, his voice low and soothing. It's okay, little one. We're here. We're going to bring her down. Just stay calm." The cub's ears twitched. It looked at him, then back up at its mother, then at him again. And then, incredibly, it took 2 steps closer. Ravi inhaled sharply. "Arjun, don't move," Arjun whispered. "Nobody move." The cub came closer still until it was only 5 feet away. Close enough that Arjun could see the pale gold of its eyes, the soft downy fur on its cheeks, the faint trembling in its legs. It looked at him, really looked at him, and in that gaze Arjun saw trust. "We'll save her," he said quietly. "I promise." The cub sat down and waited. Rajesh reached the hollow first, his boots finding purchase on the gnarled bark of the ancient banyan. He secured his safety rope to a thick branch, then leaned in carefully to examine the opening. What he saw made his stomach clench. "Dr. Sharma," he called down, his voice tight, "the opening is smaller than it looks from below, and there's a secondary branch growing inside the cavity. It's pressing against her ribcage. That's probably what's keeping her wedged in." Priya cursed under her breath. "Can you remove the branch?" Vikram, who had climbed up beside Rajesh, pulled out a folding saw from his belt and studied the branch. "It's thick, maybe 3 inches in diameter. And it's alive, still connected to the main trunk. If we cut it, we'll need at least 5 minutes, maybe more." "We don't have 5 minutes once I sedate her," Priya said, calculating quickly. "Her respiratory system will be depressed. If we can't get her out quickly enough—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Arjun glanced at the mother leopard. Her eyes were open now, watching the men climb near her with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She tried to shift her body, a weak attempt to defend herself, but she barely moved an inch. She was trapped in every sense of the word, physically, emotionally, hopelessly. "What if we cut the branch first, before sedation?" Arjun suggested. "That way, once she's under, we can extract her immediately." Priya shook her head. The sound and vibration of sawing could panic her. If she thrashes while they're up there, someone could get hurt, or she could injure herself further, or the cubs. "Cubs," Ravi repeated softly. "How many do you think she's carrying?" "Leopards usually have 2 to 3, Priya said. "Given the size of her belly, I'd guess 2, maybe 3 if we're unlucky." Unlucky. The word hung in the air like smoke. The cub, still sitting near Arjun, suddenly let out a soft cry, not the desperate wail from before, but something quieter, almost questioning. It looked up at its mother, then at the humans surrounding the tree, and then directly at Arjun. Its eyes seemed to ask, "Why aren't you helping her yet?" "We're trying," Arjun whispered. "We're trying." Priya made her decision. "Rajesh, Vikram, start cutting the branch. Work as quietly as you can. I'll prepare the sedative and be ready to dart her the moment you're done. Arjun, keep that cub calm. If it starts crying again, the mother could panic." Everyone moved into position. Rajesh and Vikram began sawing carefully, their movements slow and deliberate to minimize noise and vibration. The sound was still audible, a rhythmic shk, 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 but it was softer than Arjun had expected, almost blending with the natural sounds of the forest. The mother leopard's ears flattened against her head. Her eyes widened, and she released a low, warning growl, weak but unmistakable. The cub immediately tensed, rising to its feet. "Easy," Arjun murmured, slowly extending his hand, palm down, toward the cub. He didn't try to touch it. That would be too much, too fast. But he let the gesture speak for itself. "Trust me. Stay." The cub looked at his hand, then at his face. For a long, impossible moment, they simply stared at each other, man and wild animal, separated by millions of years of evolution, yet connected by something far older and more fundamental than either of them could name. The cub sat back down. The sawing continued. 2 minutes. 3. The branch was tougher than it looked, its wood dense and fibrous. Sweat dripped from Rajesh's forehead, despite the late afternoon breeze that had begun to stir the canopy. Vikram worked in alternating shifts, their hands switching the saw back and forth to maintain steady pressure. Priya stood below with the dart gun raised, her eye pressed to the sight, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. She had loaded a carefully measured dose of medetomidine mixed with ketamine, enough to relax the leopard's muscles and dull her fear response, but not so much that it would dangerously suppress her breathing or harm the unborn cubs. It was a delicate balance, one that required precision and experience, and luck, always luck. Halfway through, Vikram called down, "Maybe 2 more minutes." Arjun glanced at his watch. They had been here for nearly 40 minutes now. The sun was sinking lower, and soon the forest would be swallowed by twilight. Working in the dark would make everything exponentially more dangerous. The cub suddenly stood again, its body rigid. Arjun followed its gaze and felt his heart skip. The mother leopard's eyes had closed. "Priya!" he shouted. "She's losing consciousness." Priya's head snapped up. "What?" "She just closed her eyes. She's not moving." Priya lowered the dart gun and raised her binoculars. "Damn it! She's going into shock. The stress, the exhaustion, the pregnancy, her body is shutting down." "Rajesh, how much longer?" Arjun called up. 30 seconds, maybe less." The cub began to cry again, louder now, more frantic. It took several steps toward the tree, then stopped, turned back to Arjun and cried again. The sound was heartbreaking, a child watching its mother slip away, powerless to stop it. "Almost there," Vikram grunted, his arms straining as he sawed through the last few fibers of wood. "Got it!" The branch fell away, tumbling through the air and landing with a dull thud on the forest floor. The hollow opening was now wider, no longer obstructed. "Clear!" Rajesh shouted. "Darting now!" Priya raised the gun, aimed carefully at the exposed shoulder of the leopard, and squeezed the trigger. The dart flew through the air with a soft puff and struck the leopard just below her neck. She didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't growl. She simply remained motionless, her body limp inside the hollow. "How long until it takes effect?" Ravi asked. "It already has," Priya said grimly. "She was barely conscious to begin with." "Rajesh, Vikram, you need to get her out now. We're out of time." The 2 men moved quickly, repositioning themselves on either side of the hollow. Rajesh reached in carefully, sliding his hands beneath the leopard's front legs, while Vikram supported her hindquarters. The mother was dead weight now, her body completely limp. "She's heavier than she looks," Rajesh grunted. "The pregnancy—" "Just pull," Priya commanded, gently but firmly. "Don't twist her body." They pulled. Slowly, inch by inch, the leopard's body began to slide free from the hollow. Her head emerged first, lolling to one side, her tongue visible between her teeth. Then her shoulders, her swollen belly, her hind legs. And then she was free. Rajesh and Vikram lowered her carefully using a rope harness, guiding her descent as the other rangers steadied the lines from below. It took another 3 minutes. Agonizing, slow minutes. But finally, the mother leopard was on the ground, lying on her side on a large canvas tarp that Priya had spread out. The cub rushed forward immediately, crying desperately. It nudged its mother's face with its nose, licked her cheek, pawed at her shoulder, but the mother didn't move, didn't open her eyes, didn't respond. Priya dropped to her knees beside the leopard, her hands moving quickly over the animal's body. She pressed her stethoscope to the chest, listened, moved it, listened again. She checked the gums, pale, almost white. She felt for a pulse at the femoral artery. Her face went very still. "Priya?" Arjun's voice was barely a whisper. She didn't answer. She grabbed a syringe from her kit, filled it with a clear liquid, a tipamazole, a reversal agent for the sedative, and injected it directly into the leopard's vein. Then she began chest compressions, her hands positioned carefully over the heart, pressing down in steady, rhythmic intervals. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, come on, come on." The cub cried louder, a sound of pure anguish. Arjun felt something inside him crack. He had seen death before, many times, but this felt different. This felt like a promise broken, like hope extinguished, like the worst possible outcome of a situation that had already seemed impossible. Priya continued compressions, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Nothing. "Priya," one of the rangers said softly. "Maybe—" "No," she snapped. "Not yet." She continued, 3 minutes, 4. And then, impossibly, the leopard's chest rose. Just a little, just once. But it rose. "She's breathing," Ravi shouted. Priya immediately grabbed her stethoscope again, pressing it to the leopard's chest. Her eyes widened. "Heartbeat! Faint! But it's there! Get the oxygen! Now!" One of the rangers ran to the jeep and returned with a portable oxygen tank and mask. Priya positioned it over the leopard's muzzle, adjusting the flow rate. The mother's chest rose again, then again. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, but present. The cub stopped crying. It stared at its mother, then at Priya, then back at its mother. Slowly, tentatively, it moved closer and curled up against the mother's belly, its small body trembling. "She's not out of danger yet," Priya said, her voice shaking slightly despite her professional composure. "She's in critical condition. And the cubs—" She placed her hand gently on the leopard's swollen abdomen. Her expression changed. "What?" Arjun asked. "What is it?" Priya looked up at him, her eyes wide with something between awe and horror. "She's in labor," she said. "The stress triggered it. The cubs are coming." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Priya's hand remained pressed against the leopard's abdomen, her fingers moving gently, assessing. Her face was a mask of concentration, but Arjun could see the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes darted between the mother's shallow breathing and the rhythmic contractions rippling beneath the fur. "How far along is she?" Arjun asked, crouching beside her. "Contractions are irregular but present," Priya said, her voice clinical but strained. "Given her condition, this is the worst possible timing. Her body is already in shock, her blood pressure is dangerously low, and now she has to sustain labor. The cubs might not survive, she might not survive." The cub, still curled against its mother's belly, lifted its head and looked at Priya. Its eyes were no longer frantic. They were pleading, filled with a depth of emotion that seemed impossibly human. "What do we do?" Ravi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Priya was silent for a moment, her mind clearly racing through options, calculating odds, weighing impossible choices. Finally, she spoke. "We need to stabilize her first. Fluids, oxygen, monitoring. If we can get her heart rate and blood pressure up, her body might be able to handle the labor naturally. But if she deteriorates further—" "Then what?" Vikram asked from where he stood, still holding the climbing rope. Priya met his eyes. "Then I'll have to perform an emergency C-section, here, in the field, with minimal equipment." The weight of those words settled over the group like a physical thing. A cesarean section on a wild leopard, outdoors, with no surgical suite, no anesthesia team, no blood transfusions available if something went wrong. It would be a last resort, a desperate gamble with death itself. "Let's focus on stabilization first," Arjun said firmly, though his heart was pounding. "What do you need?" Priya snapped into action mode. "Rajesh, get the IV kit from my bag. Vikram, I need the portable monitor. We need to track her heart rate and oxygen saturation. Ravi, set up the generator and lights. The sun's going down, and if this goes into the night, we'll need visibility." The rangers dispersed immediately, each moving with purpose. Arjun remained beside Priya, watching as she prepared the IV line with practiced efficiency. The mother leopard's front leg lay limp on the tarp, and Priya carefully shaved a small patch of fur, cleaned the area with antisine, and inserted the catheter into the vein. "Saline with dextrose," she murmured, adjusting the drip rate. "She's severely dehydrated. This should help with blood pressure." The leopard didn't react to the needle. She was too weak, too far gone. Her breathing remained shallow despite the oxygen mask, each breath a visible effort. The cub watched everything with wide eyes. When Priya moved to attach the portable monitor's sensors to the mother's chest, the cub shifted slightly, as if to protect her. But then it seemed to understand that these humans were trying to help, and it settled back down, its small body pressed protectively against its mother's belly. "Heart rate is 40 beats per minute," Vikram read from the monitor. That's way too low, isn't it? Normal for a leopard is 60 to 100, Priya said. She's bradycardic. The shock and exhaustion are shutting down her system. She drew another syringe from her kit. I'm giving her epinephrine, just a small dose to stimulate the heart. Too much could trigger a cardiac event, but we don't have a choice. She administered the injection, and they all watched the monitor in tense silence. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The number began to climb. 42. 45. 50. 55. Come on, Priya whispered. Come on, Mama. Fight. 60. 65. The leopard's breathing deepened slightly. Her ear twitched, the first voluntary movement she had made since being pulled from the tree. It's working, Ravi said, relief flooding his voice. But then the leopard's body tensed. Her legs stiffened, her back arched slightly, and a low, guttural moan escaped her throat. Contraction, Priya said immediately. Strong one. The labor is progressing. The cub jumped to its feet, startled by its mother's movement and sound. It cried out, confused and frightened. Arjun slowly extended his hand toward the cub, not touching, just offering presence. It's okay, little one. She's fighting. She's still fighting. The cub looked at him, then at its mother, then back at him. And then, in a gesture that would stay with Arjun for the rest of his life, the cub moved closer to him and sat down beside his knee. Not touching, but close, seeking comfort in proximity. Arjun felt tears prick his eyes. He blinked them away quickly. The generator roared to life, and portable LED lights blazed on, casting harsh white illumination over the scene. The sun had nearly disappeared now, leaving the forest draped in purple twilight. In the artificial light, the mother leopard's condition looked even more dire. Her coat was matted with sweat and dirt, her eyes still closed, her body trembling with each contraction. Priya checked the monitor again. Heart rate is holding at 68. Blood pressure is still low but improving. Oxygen saturation is 87%. Not great but survivable. She placed her hand on the abdomen again, feeling. The first cub is in position. If her body can maintain this level of function, she might be able to deliver naturally. And if she can't? Arjun asked quietly. Priya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Another contraction rippled through the leopard's body. This time, something changed. Priya's eyes widened, and she quickly moved to examine the birth canal. I see crowning. The first cub is coming. Everyone leaned in slightly, the tension palpable. Even the forest seemed quieter now, as if the trees themselves were watching. Should we help? Vikram asked. No, Priya said firmly. Not unless there's a complication. The birth canal is adequate and her body is doing the work. Human intervention could cause more harm than good. We watch, we wait, we be ready. So they watched. The mother leopard's body contracted again, stronger this time. Her breathing quickened, became ragged. The cub pressed closer to Arjun, its small body trembling. Arjun placed his hand very gently on the ground beside it, not touching, but close enough that the cub could feel the warmth. Come on, Mama, Priya whispered, her hands hovering near the birth canal, ready to assist if needed. You can do this. You've done this before. Just one more time, just... And then, in a rush of fluid and membrane, the first cub emerged. It was tiny, impossibly tiny, no larger than Arjun's hand. Its fur was slick and dark, its eyes closed, its body completely still. Too still. Priya immediately scooped it up, her movements swift and practiced. She cleared the membrane from its face, wiped its nose and mouth, and then, using a small rubber bulb, suctioned the airways. Nothing. The cub didn't move, didn't breathe. No, Ravi whispered. Priya rubbed the cub's body vigorously with a towel, stimulating circulation. She held it upside down briefly, allowing any fluid to drain from the lungs, then positioned it on the towel and began tiny, gentle chest compressions with 2 fingers. Breathe, she commanded. Breathe, damn it. The older cub, the one who had brought them here, stood up and moved closer, its eyes fixed on the newborn. It released a soft, questioning cry. Priya continued compressions. 10 seconds, 20, 30, and then the newborn cub's mouth opened. Its chest expanded. It released a tiny, weak, but unmistakable cry. "Yes!" Vikram shouted. Priya didn't celebrate. She quickly dried the cub, checked its color, still pale but pinkening, and placed it on a heated pad that one of the rangers had prepared. One down. Pulse is weak but present. Breathing is shallow but functional. It's a fighter. The mother leopard, as if sensing the birth of her cub, released another low moan. Her body tensed again. "Second cub is coming," Priya said, repositioning herself. "This one's moving faster." The older cub watched everything, its body rigid with attention. Arjun could almost see the wheels turning behind those green eyes, trying to understand, trying to process the chaos of life and death happening before it. "I see it," Priya said. "Here it comes." The second cub emerged more quickly than the first, sliding out in a single strong contraction. This one was slightly larger and it was moving, wriggling weakly even before Priya could clear the membrane. "Good sign," she said, working quickly to clean the cub's face and airways. This one began breathing almost immediately, releasing a stronger cry than its sibling. "Female. Healthy respiratory function. Color is good." She placed the second cub beside the first on the heating pad. Two tiny lives, brand new to the world, born in the most unlikely of circumstances. The older cub stepped forward cautiously, sniffing toward its new siblings. Its tail, which had been tucked low since the ordeal began, lifted slightly. "Is that it?" Ravi asked. "Two cubs." Priya had her hand on the mother's abdomen again, palpating carefully. Her expression shifted. "No, there's a third. I can feel it. But what? It's not positioned correctly. It's breech, coming hindquarters first. And the mother is exhausted. I don't know if she has the strength for another contraction strong enough to deliver a breech cub." The monitor began beeping urgently. Everyone's eyes snapped to the screen. The mother's heart rate was dropping. 65, 60, 55. "She's crashing again," Priya said, her voice tight. "Her body is giving out." The third cub, still unborn, still trapped inside its dying mother, was running out of time. Priya looked up at Arjun, and in her eyes he saw the weight of an impossible decision. "I have to cut her open," she said. "Right now. It's the only way to save the third cub. But the surgery itself, in her weakened state, could kill her." The clearing fell silent except for the beeping of the monitor and the soft cries of the two newborn cubs. The older cub looked at Arjun, and in that moment, Arjun understood what it was asking. "Save her, please. Whatever it takes. Do it," Arjun said, his voice steady despite the terror churning in his gut. "Save them both." Priya nodded once. "Rajesh, Vikram, I need you to hold her steady. Ravi, prep the surgical kit. Arjun, keep that cub back. If it interferes, it won't," Arjun said with certainty he didn't fully understand. Priya pulled on sterile gloves, her hands moving with the speed and precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times, even though she hadn't. Not like this, not in the field, not with so much at stake. She positioned her scalpel over the leopard's swollen abdomen. "Forgive me, Mama," she whispered, and then she began to cut. The scalpel cut through fur and skin, with a precision born of years of training and countless hours of practice. But no amount of training could fully prepare someone for this, operating on a dying animal in a forest clearing, under portable lights, with minimal equipment and a ticking clock that measured life in heartbeats. Priya's hands didn't shake. They couldn't afford to. "Hemostats," she said sharply, and Ravi placed the instruments in her hand before she finished the word. Blood welled up from the incision, not the bright red of healthy circulation, but a darker, sluggish flow that spoke of shock and failing systems. The monitor continued its urgent beeping. "Heart rate, 52, 50, 48. "She's losing pressure," Vikram said, his voice tight. "I know," Priya said through gritted teeth. "I'm working as fast as I can." She deepened the incision, moving through the layers of muscle with careful, controlled cuts. "Too shallow?" and she wouldn't reach the uterus in time. Too deep, and she could nick a major blood vessel or damage an organ. The margin for error was non-existent. The older cub had moved back at Arjun's gentle urging, but it hadn't gone far. It sat about 6 feet away, its body rigid, its eyes locked on its mother. Every few seconds, it would release a soft, anxious cry, not loud enough to disturb the surgery, but persistent enough to remind everyone what was at stake. Arjun knelt beside it, his presence a silent anchor. "She's strong," he murmured, as much to himself as to the cub. "She's survived this long. She can survive a little longer." The 2 newborn cubs squirmed on the heating pad, their tiny cries adding to the symphony of tension. They were alive, breathing, fighting, proof that life could emerge even from the darkest circumstances. But there was still one more life trapped in the darkness. "I'm through the muscle wall," Priya announced, exposing the uterus now. The uterus was visible now, a thick, pale membrane stretched tight. Priya could see movement inside, faint, but there. The 3rd cub was still alive. For now. "Ravi, increase the oxygen flow to the mother. I need her blood oxygen level as high as possible." Priya positioned the scalpel against the uterine wall. "This is the critical moment. Once I cut this, there's no going back." "You can do this," Arjun said quietly. "We all believe in you." Priya glanced at him for just a fraction of a second, and something in her expression softened. Then her jaw set, her focus sharpened, and she made the cut. Amniotic fluid rushed out, clear and warm. Priya's hands moved inside immediately, finding the cub's hindquarters, grasping firmly but gently. Breech presentation confirmed. The legs are folded wrong. That's why it couldn't descend naturally. She began to pull, her movements slow and steady. With a breech birth, rushing could cause spinal damage or suffocation, but taking too long meant the cub would die from oxygen deprivation now that the amniotic sac was ruptured. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, little one. Work with me." The cub's hindquarters emerged first. Tiny back legs, still folded, then the small tail. Priya supported the body carefully, adjusting the angle to allow the shoulders to follow. The monitor's beeping grew more urgent. Heart rate 45, 42. "Priya," Rajesh said, warning in his voice. "Almost there," she said, her focus absolute. The cub's body was halfway out now. She could see the chest, still compressed, not yet breathing. Just the head, The head cleared the incision. The cub hung limp in Priya's hands, completely motionless. Its body was larger than the other 2, but its color was wrong, grayish-blue instead of healthy pink. "It's not breathing," Ravi said, his voice cracking. Priya didn't waste time responding. She clamped and cut the umbilical cord in 2 swift motions, then turned her full attention to the cub. She cleared the membrane from its face, suctioned the airways aggressively, and began rubbing the body with fierce intensity. Nothing. She held the cub upside down, allowing gravity to help drain any fluid from the lungs. Then she placed it on the towel and began chest compressions, tiny, rapid pumps with 2 fingers, 30 compressions, followed by 2 small rescue breaths administered through a modified tube. "Come on," she said, her voice rising. "Come on! You didn't survive this long just to give up now. Breathe!" The older cub stood up suddenly, its body trembling. It took several steps forward, moving past Arjun despite his attempt to gently block it. It approached Priya and the motionless newborn, and then it did something extraordinary. It touched its nose to the newborn's tiny body and released a low, rumbling sound. Not quite a purr, not quite a cry, but something in between. A sound of encouragement, of family, of "please don't leave us." Priya continued compressions, her arms aching, her heart pounding. 30 seconds, 45, a minute. And then the newborn cub's mouth opened. Its chest expanded sharply. It released a weak, gasping cry. "Yes!" Vikram shouted. "It's breathing!" The cub's color began to shift from grey to pale pink. Its legs twitched. Another breath, stronger this time, then another. Priya quickly dried it and placed it on the heating pad with its siblings. Male, weak but viable, respiratory distress but improving. She checked the time on her watch. The cub had been without oxygen for nearly 90 seconds. Possible hypoxia complications, but if the breathing stabilizes... The monitor's beeping suddenly changed pitch, becoming a continuous, high-pitched alarm. Everyone's heads snapped toward the screen. Heart rate, 35, 30, 28. The mother leopard's body had gone completely limp. Her breathing had stopped. "She's in cardiac arrest," Priya said, her voice sharp with controlled panic. "Ravi, take over with the cubs. Everyone else, I need help now." She abandoned the surgical site and moved to the leopard's chest, her hands already positioned for compressions. "Rajesh, get me 1 milligram of epinephrine. Vikram, bag her. Manual ventilation through the oxygen mask. Arjun, apply pressure to the surgical site to control bleeding." They moved like a well-choreographed unit, each person knowing exactly what to do. Arjun pressed sterile gauze against the incision, feeling the warm blood seeping through. Vikram squeezed the ventilation bag rhythmically, forcing oxygen into the leopard's lungs. Rajesh prepared the syringe with trembling hands. Priya pumped the leopard's chest with strong, steady compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... She had done this before, an hour ago, and brought the leopard back, but that was before the trauma of surgery, before the blood loss, before the complete exhaustion of delivering 3 cubs. Could lightning strike twice? "Epinephrine ready," Rajesh said. "Administer it," Priya ordered, never pausing her compressions. Rajesh injected the medication directly into the IV line. They waited, watching the monitor, willing the numbers to change. Nothing. "Again," Priya said. "Another dose." "That's a lot of epinephrine," Vikram warned. "If her heart suddenly restarts with that much stimulant..." "If it doesn't restart, she's dead anyway," Priya snapped. "Do it." Rajesh administered the second dose. Priya continued compressions. Her arms were burning now, her shoulders screaming in protest, but she didn't slow down. "Come on, Mama. You have 3 babies now. 3 reasons to fight. You don't get to quit. You hear me? You don't get to quit." The older cub moved closer again, standing beside Priya now. It looked down at its mother's still face, then up at Priya, then back at its mother. And then it did something that broke everyone's heart. It placed its small paw on its mother's head, gently, deliberately. A gesture of love, of goodbye. "No," Arjun whispered. "Not like this." Priya's compressions grew more forceful, almost desperate. "Fight! Fight!" And then a beep, different from the alarm, single, short, then another. The monitor flickered. The flat line jumped once, twice. "I've got a heartbeat," Vikram said, his voice shaking. "Weak, but it's there." The line on the monitor began tracing a rhythm again. Irregular, too slow, but present. 28 beats per minute. 32. 38. Priya didn't stop compressions, not yet. "Keep ventilating, keep pushing oxygen. We need to get her above 50 before I can stop." 42, 45, 48. The leopard's chest began to rise and fall on its own. Shallow, labored breaths, but independent of the ventilation bag. 50, 55. "She's breathing on her own," Vikram said, wonder in his voice. "She's actually breathing." 60, 62. Priya finally stopped compressions, her arms dropping to her sides. She was shaking now, the adrenaline draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Vitals are stabilizing. She's in critical condition, but alive. Alive. She looked down at the surgical incision, still bleeding. "I need to close her up, fast." But even as she said it, she was already reaching for the sutures, her hands finding their steadiness again through sheer force of will. She worked quickly, methodically, closing the uterine wall first, then the muscle layers, then the skin. Each stitch was placed with care despite the urgency, each knot tied with precision. The older cub hadn't moved. Its paw remained on its mother's head, its body pressed close. When the mother's ear twitched, a tiny, involuntary movement, the cub released a soft, hopeful cry. "Almost done," Priya murmured, tying off the final external suture. "Just There. She stepped back, surveying her work. The incision was closed, the bleeding controlled. The mother's heart rate was holding at 63. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The 3 newborn cubs were squirming on the heating pad, their cries growing stronger. Against every odd, against all logic and probability, they had done it. They had saved them all. Arjun sank back on his heels, his hands covered in blood, his clothes soaked with sweat despite the cool evening air. He looked at Priya, at the exhausted rangers, at the older cub still keeping vigil beside its mother, at the 3 tiny lives that hadn't existed 2 hours ago. "I can't believe," his voice cracked, "I can't believe we actually—" "Don't celebrate yet," Priya said, though there was a hint of a smile on her exhausted face. "The next 48 hours are critical. Infection risk is high. She needs antibiotics, continued fluid support, round-the-clock monitoring. The cubs need to nurse, and I don't know if she'll have the strength. And we need to get them all to the Wildlife Rescue Center, where we have proper equipment." "But they're alive," Ravi said softly. "Right now, in this moment, they're all alive." Priya nodded slowly. "Yes, right now, they are." The older cub suddenly left its mother's side and moved to the heating pad where its siblings lay. It sniffed each one carefully, thoroughly, learning their scent. Then it turned to look at Priya, at Arjun, at all the humans who had fought so hard, and in its eyes was something unmistakable: gratitude. The forest had gone quiet around them. The sun had completely set now, and the stars were beginning to emerge through the canopy gaps. In the harsh white light of the portable LEDs, the scene looked almost surreal, like something from a dream, too impossible to be true. But it was true. The blood on their hands was real. The exhaustion in their bones was real. The steady beep of the heart monitor was real. Life, stubborn, tenuous, miraculous life, was real. "Let's get them ready for transport," Priya said, her voice all business again, though Arjun could hear the emotion barely contained beneath it. "We move in 10 minutes. I want to be at the rescue center before midnight." Everyone nodded and began to move, gathering equipment, preparing the transport cage, securing the medical supplies. But for just a moment, just one brief, perfect moment, Arjun allowed himself to simply stand still and marvel. At the courage it took for a cub to approach humans for help, at the skill it took to perform surgery in impossible conditions, at the sheer, stubborn will to survive that burned in every living creature, at the unthinkable things that could happen when compassion met crisis. The older cub looked at him one more time, and Arjun could have sworn it nodded. "Thank you," it seemed to say. "Thank you for keeping your promise." "You're welcome," Arjun whispered back. "You're so welcome." The transport cage was too small. That was Priya's first concern, as Rajesh and Vikram carefully positioned the mother leopard inside. The cage was designed for a single adult leopard, not an adult plus 3 newborns, plus an anxious older cub who refused to be separated from his family. "We'll make it work," Arjun said, reading the worry on her face. "It's only 30 kilometers to the center. They need to be together." Priya hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but I want the heating pad positioned under the newborns, and the mother needs to be on her side so the surgical site isn't compressed. The older cub can—" She paused, watching as the cub climbed into the cage of its own accord and curled up protectively around its tiny siblings. "Never mind, he's already figured it out." They secured the cage in the back of the largest jeep, surrounding it with blankets to cushion against the rough road ahead. Priya climbed in beside it, her medical kit within arm's reach, the portable monitor still attached to the mother's chest. The steady beep of her heartbeat, 68 beats per minute now, stronger than before, was the most beautiful sound Arjun had ever heard. "I'll ride with you," Arjun said, climbing into the back, "in case you need an extra pair of hands." Priya didn't argue. She looked as exhausted as he felt, her face pale in the LED light, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline crash. But her eyes were sharp, alert, scanning the mother leopard for any sign of distress. Ravi took the wheel, with Rajesh in the passenger seat navigating. The other rangers would follow in the second jeep with the equipment. Drive slowly, Priya instructed. Every bump could stress the surgical site. And avoid sudden stops. Her blood pressure is still unstable. Understood, Ravi said, starting the engine gently. As the jeep began to move, rolling carefully down the dirt path, Arjun looked back at the ancient banyan tree silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Just 2 hours ago, it had been a death trap. Now it was just a tree again, silent, impassive, keeping whatever secrets the forest held. But Arjun would never see it the same way. The first 10 minutes of the drive were tense and silent, except for the rumble of the engine and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Priya kept her hand on the mother leopard's neck, feeling for the pulse, monitoring the temperature. The newborns squirmed and mewed softly, their tiny voices barely audible over the road noise. The older cub kept his position, his body wrapped protectively around his siblings, but his eyes remained open, watching everything. Watching the humans, watching the passing darkness beyond the jeep, watching his mother's face. What will happen to them? Arjun asked quietly. At the center, Priya didn't look up from her patient. The mother will need intensive care for at least a week. Antibiotics, fluids, pain management, wound monitoring. If she can nurse the cubs, that's ideal. If not, we'll have to bottle feed them every 2 hours until she recovers. She paused, her hand moving to check the surgical incision. The older cub presents a different challenge. He's wild, not habituated to humans, but he's also bonded to his mother and now to these newborns. Separating them could cause severe distress. So you'll keep them together? For now, yes, but eventually, if the mother and cubs survive and thrive, they'll need to be released back into the wild. That's the goal, always. We don't want them dependent on humans. Arjun looked at the older cub. The idea of this brave, intelligent animal returning to the forest, where dangers lurked in every shadow, where humans weren't always kind, where survival was never guaranteed, filled him with an unexpected anxiety. What about him? Arjun gestured to the older cub. Will he be released too? Priya finally met his eyes. That's complicated. He's already learned that humans can help. That knowledge could put him in danger, make him more likely to approach villages, roads, people who won't respond with compassion. Some would argue he should stay in captivity, in a sanctuary where he's safe. But wild animals belong in the wild. It's where they're meant to be. And this one, she glanced at the cub, and something soft crossed her face. This one has proven he has exceptional survival instincts. He knew when to ask for help. Maybe he'll also know when to keep his distance. The jeep hit a rough patch, and everyone tensed. The mother leopard's breathing quickened, and the monitor beeped more rapidly. Priya's hand moved to the oxygen mask, adjusting it. "Easy, Mama," she murmured. "We're almost there. Just hold on a little longer." The older cub shifted, pressing closer to his mother's face. He licked her cheek once, gently, then returned to his protective position around the newborns. "He's remarkable," Rajesh said from the front seat, watching through the rearview mirror. "I've never seen anything like this. The way he sought us out, the way he's caring for the babies. It's like he understands." "Animals understand more than we give them credit for," Priya said. "They feel love, fear, loss, hope, all of it. They just can't tell us in words, but this one?" She shook her head slowly. "This one found a way to tell us anyway." 20 minutes into the drive, one of the newborn cubs began crying more insistently. The tiny female, the second-born, squirmed and pushed against her siblings, her mouth opening and closing in the universal language of hunger. "They need to nurse soon," Priya said, concern creeping into her voice. "Colostrum is critical in the first few hours. If the mother can't produce milk—" As if hearing the words, the mother leopard's eyes opened. Just slightly, just for a moment, but open. She looked at nothing in particular, her gaze unfocused and hazy, but she was conscious. "Did you see that?" Arjun whispered. "She's waking up." Priya leaned closer, shining a small penlight into the leopard's eyes. The pupils reacted, constricting appropriately. Neurological function appears intact. That's a good sign. Very good. The mother's eyes closed again, but her breathing had changed, deeper, more regular. And then, incredibly, her front leg moved. Just a few inches, but it moved, sliding closer to the cubs as if drawn by instinct. The older cub noticed immediately. He uncurled slightly, making room, encouraging his mother toward the newborns. One of the tiny cubs, the breech male, the last-born, somehow found his way to his mother's belly, his nose pushing blindly against the fur, searching. Everyone in the jeep held their breath. The newborn's mouth found a nipple. He latched on and began to suckle. "Oh my God," Ravi breathed from the driver's seat. Is she feeding him?" Priya's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. She is. Her body knows. Even unconscious, even traumatized, her body knows her babies need her. The other two cubs, sensing their siblings' success, began pushing forward as well. The older cub gently nudged them toward their mother, his nose guiding them to the right position. Within moments, all three newborns were nursing, their tiny paws kneading, their small tails flicking with contentment. The mother leopard released a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. "She's going to make it," Arjun said, and this time it wasn't a question. Priya nodded slowly. "I think she is. I really think she is." They arrived at the Gir Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation Center 40 minutes after leaving the Banyan Grove. The facility was small but well-equipped, with veterinary surgical suites, intensive care enclosures, and dedicated staff who lived on site. News of the incoming emergency had traveled ahead, and Dr. Vikram Desai, the center's director, was waiting at the entrance with two veterinary technicians. "Priya," he said, his weathered face creasing with concern as the jeep pulled up. "I heard it was bad." "How bad?" "Pregnant female trapped in a tree hollow for unknown duration, went into shock twice, cardiac arrest once, emergency C-section in the field." Priya rattled off as they carefully unloaded the transport cage. 3 cubs delivered, 1 breech with possible hypoxia complications, but all 4 are currently stable and the cubs are nursing. Vikram's eyebrows shot up. "You performed a C-section in the field?" "Priya, that's insane, reckless, impossible." She smiled tiredly. "I know, but we're here, and they're alive, so let's focus on keeping them that way." They transferred the cage to a specially prepared intensive care enclosure, larger than the transport cage, climate-controlled, with soft bedding and dim lighting. The space had been divided into 2 sections, one for the mother and newborns, and a connected area where the older cub could stay close but give them space if needed. As they opened the cage door, the older cub hesitated. He looked at his mother, still lying on her side, the 3 newborns tucked against her belly. Then he looked at the humans surrounding them, Priya, Arjun, the technicians, the director. For a moment, Arjun saw fear flash across the cub's face. The wild fear of a creature surrounded by predators. "It's okay," Arjun said softly, crouching down to make himself smaller, less threatening. "This is a safe place, I promise." The cub looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, it stepped out of the cage and into the enclosure. It sniffed the bedding, explored the corners, tested the space with the caution of an animal in unfamiliar territory. But it didn't panic. It didn't try to flee. It trusted. Once satisfied, the cub returned to his mother's side and resumed his protective position around the newborns. "Remarkable," Dr. Desai murmured. "Simply remarkable." Priya began setting up IV lines connected to a more sophisticated fluid pump. The technicians brought antibiotics, anti-inflammatory medication, and additional monitoring equipment. Within 15 minutes, the mother leopard was fully integrated into the intensive care system, every vital sign tracked and recorded. "What are her chances?" Dr. Desai asked quietly, reading the chart. Priya was silent for a moment, her eyes on the leopard. 48 hours ago, I would have said 0. Right now, If she makes it through the next 2 days without infection or complications, maybe 70%, maybe more. And the cubs. The first two look strong. The third, the breech birth. I'm worried about neurological damage from oxygen deprivation. We won't know for several days, but right now they're nursing, they're vocal, they're active. That's all we can ask for. Dr. Desai placed a hand on Priya's shoulder. You did good work tonight. Extraordinary work. She shook her head. It wasn't just me, it was Arjun and his team. It was the equipment working when it should have failed. It was luck and timing and... She glanced at the older cub. And one very brave little leopard who refused to let his mother die alone. Arjun felt his throat tighten. He had been in the Forest Service for 20 years, had participated in dozens of rescues, had saved countless animals. But this felt different. This felt like more than a rescue. This felt like a covenant, a promise made and kept, a bridge built between two worlds that rarely understood each other. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Priya finally convinced Arjun and the other rangers to go home and rest. There's nothing more you can do here, she said, though her own exhaustion was evident in every line of her face. The staff will monitor them through the night. If anything changes, I'll call you immediately. Arjun wanted to argue, wanted to stay, but his body was shutting down. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving only bone-deep fatigue. You'll call? He pressed. No matter what time. I promise. He nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the enclosure one last time. The older cub was lying down now, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed. But when Arjun approached, those green eyes opened and focused on him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Man and wild animal, connected by shared trauma and shared triumph. Thank you, Arjun whispered, for trusting us, for being so brave. Thank you. The cub's tail flicked once. Then he closed his eyes and finally allowed himself to sleep. Outside, the night was cool and clear. The stars blazed overhead, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded beneath them. Ravi was already in the jeep, half asleep. Rajesh and Vikram were loading the equipment. Arjun stood for a moment, breathing in the night air, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into his bones. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. Mom is asking for you. She's having a good day. Can you visit tomorrow? Arjun smiled and typed back, I'll be there in the morning. Tell her I have a story for her. As the jeep carried them away from the center, back toward their homes and beds, and the ordinary world that would seem somehow different now, Arjun looked back one last time. Through the window of the intensive care unit, he could just barely see the soft glow of the monitoring lights. Somewhere in that glow, a mother leopard slept, her 3 newborn cubs nursing at her side, her brave older son standing guard. 4 lives that should have ended tonight. 4 lives that were given a second chance, because sometimes when you least expect it, the unthinkable happens. And it's beautiful. Dawn broke over the Gir Forest Reserve with the soft gold light that comes only after darkness has been truly earned. Arjun had slept for 4 hours, restless, fragmented sleep, filled with images of green eyes and monitors beeping and tiny lives hanging in the balance. He woke before his alarm, his first conscious thought reaching for his phone to check for messages from Priya. There was one, sent just 20 minutes earlier. Mother's vitals stable through the night. All 3 cubs nursing well. Older cub is alert and protective. No signs of infection yet. Come see for yourself. Arjun dressed quickly, skipping breakfast, and drove through the empty morning streets toward the rescue center. The world felt different somehow, sharper, more vivid, as if the events of the previous day had peeled away some layer of numbness he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. When he arrived, the center was already bustling with activity. Staff members moved between enclosures with food and medication, and the morning sounds of various rescued animals, birds calling, a bear grunting, somewhere the chatter of monkeys, created a symphony of wildness contained. But Arjun only had eyes for one enclosure. Priya was there, as he knew she would be, standing outside the intensive care unit with a tablet in her hands, reviewing data. She looked up when he approached, and a genuine smile crossed her tired face. "She ate," Priya said simply, and those two words carried the weight of miracles. She what? An hour ago, she was conscious, alert, and she ate 2 pounds of raw chicken. Her body is fighting back. Arjun moved to the viewing window. Inside, the mother leopard was lying in a more natural position now, not the limp, vulnerable sprawl of yesterday, but curled protectively around her 3 cubs. Her eyes were open, clear, and focused, and she was methodically grooming the nearest cub, the tiny female, with her rough tongue. The older cub sat nearby, watching. When his mother paused in her grooming to look at him, something passed between them, a communication beyond words, a reassurance that they were safe, together, alive. "It's incredible," Arjun whispered. 24 hours ago, she was dying. "The will to survive is powerful," Priya said, "but the will to survive for someone else, that's something else entirely. Those cubs gave her a reason to fight, and that brave one," she gestured to the older cub, "he gave her a reason to hope. He went and got help. He refused to let her die alone." They watched in comfortable silence as the mother continued her maternal duties, each lick and nudge a declaration of life reclaimed. Over the next 2 weeks, Arjun visited the center every day. He told himself it was professional responsibility. As the ranger who had discovered the situation, he needed to monitor the outcome. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He needed to see them thrive. He needed to witness the promise kept. The mother leopard, whom the staff had taken to calling Asha, meaning hope in Hindi, recovered with remarkable speed. By day 3, her surgical incision showed no signs of infection. By day 5, she was standing, walking short distances, her movements careful but deliberate. By day 10, she was eating full meals and showing all the fierce protectiveness of a mother who had nearly lost everything. The 3 newborn cubs grew at an astonishing rate. The firstborn female, named Daya, Compassion, was bold and curious, the first to open her eyes, the first to attempt wobbly steps. The second-born female, Preeti, Love, was gentler, more cautious, preferring to stay close to her mother's warmth. The third cub, the breech birth, the one they had fought so hard to save, was named Himmat, meaning courage. For the first few days, Priya had watched him with clinical concern, looking for signs of developmental delays or neurological damage. But by the end of the first week, Himmat was proving his name accurate. He was smaller than his sisters, but more determined, pushing his way to the best nursing position, climbing over his siblings with stubborn persistence. "No brain damage that I can detect," Priya told Arjun on day 12, watching Himmat tumble over his sister and immediately get back up. "He's going to be just fine." But it was the older cub, the hero of this entire story, still unnamed because wild animals deserved the dignity of remaining unnamed, who fascinated everyone at the center. He had maintained his protective vigil over his mother and siblings. But as Asha recovered, his behavior began to shift. He started exploring the enclosure more, testing boundaries, practicing pounces on shadows and leaves. He was becoming what he was meant to be, a wild juvenile leopard preparing for independence. "He'll leave soon," Priya said one morning, watching him play. In the wild, cubs typically stay with their mother for 18 to 24 months, but older siblings often disperse when new cubs are born. He's already shown exceptional maturity. His instincts will tell him it's time to find his own territory. "Will he be ready?" Arjun asked. "He's so young." "He's ready," Priya said with certainty. "He's already survived what would have killed most animals. Physically, emotionally, psychologically. And he's learned the most important lesson: when to fight, when to flee, and when to ask for help. That's wisdom that will keep him alive. On day 15, Dr. Desai called Arjun into his office. "We've been discussing Asha and the cubs," he said, gesturing for Arjun to sit. "Her recovery has exceeded all expectations. The surgical site is fully healed. She's eating normally, caring for her cubs beautifully, showing no signs of trauma or stress beyond what's expected from captivity." "That's wonderful," Arjun said, though he sensed a but coming. "It is, which means we need to start planning for release." Dr. Desai pulled up a map on his computer. "The question is, where and when?" They spent the next hour discussing options. Asha had been trapped in the western sector of the reserve, but that area had a high density of both leopards and human activity. Farms, villages, roads. Releasing her there might put her in danger again. "What about the northern sector?" Arjun suggested. "Near the old temple ruins. It's remote, plenty of prey, minimal human contact, and there's a natural den site in the rocky outcroppings." Dr. Desai nodded thoughtfully. "That could work, but the cubs are too young to travel far. We'd need to wait until they're at least 8 weeks old and strong enough to handle the stress of relocation. And the older cub, he's a different story." Dr. Desai leaned back in his chair. "Legally, we should release him now. He's wild, not habituated, and every day he risks changing that. But emotionally," he paused, "separating him from his mother and siblings right now could be traumatic." Arjun thought about the older cub's journey, the desperation, the courage, the trust. What if we release him first, near the same area where we planned to release Asha? That way, when she and the cubs are released weeks later, there's a chance they could reconnect if they're both still in the area. Dr. Desai considered this. It's not ideal. Separated families rarely reunite in the wild, but it gives him the best chance at independence while leaving the door open for potential reunion. I like it. They set a date. 3 days from now, at dawn, they would release the older cub back into the wild. Arjun told his mother about the leopards that evening, sitting beside her bed as he had done countless times before. Her illness had taken so much from her. Strength, mobility, the ability to do the things she loved. But it hadn't taken her mind, or her heart, or the fierce light in her eyes when she heard stories of courage. "The baby leopard went to find humans?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. "Even though we're dangerous?" "He did," Arjun said, "because he loved his mother more than he feared us." His mother was quiet for a moment, her thin hand finding his. "That's what you do," she said softly. "Every day in that forest. You choose love over fear. I'm so proud of you, Beta." Arjun felt tears prick his eyes. "I learned it from you, Ma. You never gave up, even when things were hard. Even when you were scared, you kept fighting. We're all fighting something," she whispered. "That leopard, me, you. The question isn't whether we fight, it's whether we fight alone or together." Together. The word settled into Arjun's chest like a seed taking root. The older cub hadn't fought alone. He had reached across the divide between species, between instinct and reason, and asked for help. And in doing so, he had saved not just his mother, but 3 siblings who wouldn't have existed without that intervention. One act of courage, rippling outward, creating life where there should have been death. The morning of the release was cool and grey, with mist hanging low over the forest. Arjun, Priya, Dr. Desai, and a small team of rangers drove to the northern sector in silence, the transport cage secured in the back of the jeep. Inside, the older cub was alert, but calm. He had been sedated lightly for the journey, just enough to reduce stress, not enough to impair his faculties. His eyes were open, watching the passing landscape, recognizing perhaps that something significant was happening. They reached the release site just as the sun began to burn through the mist. It was a clearing surrounded by dense forest, with rocky outcroppings nearby that would provide den sites and high vantage points. A small stream ran through the area, water, cover, prey corridors. Everything a young leopard needed to establish territory. They positioned the transport cage facing the forest and opened the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. The older cub sat inside, looking out at the wild world that was his birthright and his future. Then he stood. He stepped out of the cage slowly, his paws touching natural earth for the first time in 2 weeks. He lifted his head, scenting the air, taking in the complex symphony of smells that meant home, freedom, possibility. He took another step, then another, and then he stopped and looked back. His eyes found Arjun's across the clearing. For one last time, man and leopard regarded each other, separated by biology, united by experience. Arjun raised his hand, a small gesture of farewell and blessing. "Be safe," he whispered. "Be wild. Be free." The older cub held his gaze for another heartbeat. Then he turned, and in 3 powerful bounds, he disappeared into the forest. The mist closed behind him like a curtain, and he was gone. 8 weeks later, when Asha and her 3 cubs were released in the same area, Arjun stood in the same clearing and watched them vanish into the same forest. Asha went first, her movements confident and sure, her body fully healed. The 3 cubs tumbled after her, Daya in the lead, pretty close to her mother, little Himat bringing up the rear with characteristic determination. They didn't look back. And that, Arjun knew, was exactly as it should be. Wild animals belonged to the wild, not to the humans who occasionally helped them. The greatest success was not gratitude or recognition, but the simple fact of their return to where they belonged. Still, as he drove away from the release site, Arjun couldn't help but hope that somewhere in those trees, a young leopard with wise green eyes had caught the scent of his mother and siblings. That maybe, against all odds, they would cross paths again. That the family he had fought so hard to save would remain, in some way, whole. Months passed. The monsoon came and went. Arjun continued his ranger duties, walking the same paths, protecting the same forest, encountering countless animals, going about their wild lives. And then, one evening during a routine patrol near the northern sector, he saw them. Through his binoculars, in the amber light of sunset, a female leopard lounged on a rocky outcropping. 3 juvenile cubs played nearby, 2 practicing their stalking on each other, one smaller cub attempting to climb a tree with mixed success, and sitting alert on the highest rock, watching over them all, was a young male leopard. Nearly full-grown now, his coat gleaming, his posture confident and strong. As Arjun watched, the young male turned his head and looked directly toward where Arjun stood, hidden in the underbrush. Even at this distance, even after all these months, those green eyes were unmistakable. The leopard held his gaze for just a moment. Then he returned his attention to his family, keeping watch as the sun sank lower and the forest prepared for night. Arjun lowered his binoculars, his vision blurred with tears. They had made it. Against all odds, against logic and probability and every cruel reality of nature, they had made it. The unthinkable had happened, life had triumphed, a family had been saved and reunited, and somewhere in the complex web of existence, the world was better, richer, more beautiful, more full of possibility, because of one small act of courage and one promise kept. Arjun walked back to his jeep as darkness settled over the forest. Tomorrow he would return to his duties, to the endless work of protecting creatures who would never thank him, who would never know his name. But tonight he allowed himself to simply feel grateful. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for the resilience of life, grateful for the mysterious threads that sometimes connected us across impossible divides, grateful that he had been there in that moment when a baby leopard begged for help and dared to trust that humans might answer. And that together, man and animal, fear and courage, desperation and hope, they had created something that would ripple forward through time. One family saved, one forest enriched. One reminder that sometimes, when we open our hearts to the wild and wild creatures open their hearts to us, the unthinkable becomes possible. And that is a story worth telling. Again and again, forever. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever witnessed or lived something like this.